In this video, I'm going to talk about track selection and why, in my opinion, it's the most important part of DJing, besides something obvious like enjoy it. I'm also going to talk about why, if you absolutely have to DJ very soon, track selection is the first thing that you should learn. And I know that that's a contentious claim, so if you already have opinions on this, if you've been DJing for a while, you probably do. Hold them until the end of the video, please. I will probably address what you're thinking and talk about it a little bit. And then at the end of the video, if we didn't talk about it, you can bring it up in the comments and I'm happy to respond. The more astute of you may have noticed that this is not my bedroom. I am out of town at the moment and I had some extra time, so I figured we'd film a video. I think that's all for the intro. I've decided to ditch the hat because I hate continuity. So let's talk about what track selection is. Very simply put, track selection is the process or art or science of deciding which tracks to play. Some people could argue that track selection also includes deciding what order to play them in, but I'm going to count that as a separate thing and just consider track selection deciding which songs you want to play and which songs you don't want to play. And we can talk more about the order of songs at a later date. Now, before you get mad, let me be very clear that I'm not saying that good track selection makes you better of a DJ than a turntablist, or better of a DJ than somebody with a lot of technical mixing ability. It's not even the thing that I recommend new DJs to learn first. I generally don't introduce track selection to people that I'm teaching until a few weeks down the line, because track selection inherently has an element of playing to the audience that you're playing to, obviously, and you don't need to worry about that when you're first starting. You just need to learn how to mix and how to do the transitions. You're not going to be playing in front of a crowd immediately, ideally, so you have time to get to track selection once you've built the foundation. But obviously, if you do immediately have to play a show, track selection is what I recommend. But I just want to be clear that I'm not saying that track selection is the first thing you should learn, and I'm not saying that it's the only thing you need to learn. There are DJs that have gotten by on almost entirely their production and then track selection when playing live, and not really knowing how to mix at all. And it can be done, but it's definitely not recommended. The point of the video is that most people listening to your set ideally are not DJs, and track selection is going to make the biggest impact on their experience, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And hopefully by the end of this video, you will understand inherently how true that is. When you're playing your set, most people aren't listening to the transitions. The DJs are, certainly, but as long as the beat stays consistent enough to dance to and it doesn't hurt their ears, the majority of your audience really isn't that interested. Look at your set by time. So you're doing a 60-minute set. Well, for a lot of DJs, the amount of time you're playing a song versus transitioning is pretty low. You're transitioning maybe 10 to 20% of your entire set time, which leaves 80 to 90% of your set just playing the song that you picked. Meanwhile, you're finding the next song, setting up the transition, dancing, drinking water, whatever you're doing on stage. The audience is listening to the song that you picked. And so 80 to 90%, let's say 85% on average, of a lot of people's sets are just a track. If your transitions are really bad, then 85% of your set can still be good if the music you picked is good. That's 51 minutes out of an hour-long set. Alternatively, bad track selection can absolutely ruin a set. Pick a genre that you really dislike, whatever it is. After this video, go look up the biggest DJ you can think of that plays that genre, or just Google the name of the genre and live set, festival set. Find someone really big and really revered and listen to their set. They're probably good at DJing because they're that big, but it doesn't matter how good they are. You're not going to enjoy it. See how much of their set you can get through before turning it off. No matter how good of a DJ they are, all they're doing is really, really well transitioning from a track that you don't like to another track that you don't like. You're not going to have a good time. I think that really is the most commanding piece of evidence for this concept. You can't enjoy a set full of music that you dislike, no matter how well put together it is. So if you are, again, trying to reach the most amount of people possible, picking tracks that they like is going to work. There are some DJs that play almost exclusively crowd pleasers and edits of throwbacks and stuff, and people love it because those are songs that people likes. Those are songs that people like, and it doesn't matter how they mix, and they can just reverb out of the end of one and play the next one, and that's fine, because people really like dancing and singing along to Earth, Wind, and Fire, and so do I. This section of the script is called You versus the Audience, and it's really important that I clarify before we start this what that means. It means that there's a scale between what you really want to play and what you've been listening to in the car lately, and what the audience would love to hear. And when they bought a ticket, they were like, I hope I get to hear this song, and I hope I get to hear that song. This is a scale. These are not two options. And there are still some people out there that will very, very vehemently disagree with me on this and claim that I have no artistic integrity and that I should play what I want at all times and not consider the audience because it's my performance and they came to see me. And to a certain extent, there's merit in that, but not 100%, not in my opinion. I've been doing this a long time and I've talked to a lot of people about it, and this scale is really useful for finding out where you land. And maybe you do land all the way on this side, and maybe you land all the way on this side. Either of those are fine. It's not a rule, it's a tool. It's a way to decide what you want to play. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about you versus the audience. Okay, so we've established that playing music that people like is very important to people enjoying the show. But the problem and the major pitfall here is that you also want to play music that you like, presumably. Most DJs I know play music that they like. There are some DJs that don't play music they like or don't consider their own personal tastes when putting together a set or a performance, and that's fine. But that is generally more akin to wedding DJs and party DJs, and that's not really who my advice is geared towards. My advice is generally for DJs who are playing ticketed shows where people pay money to get in to see a music performance, and that's the point of being there. So bear that in mind. If that's not you, this may be useful, it may not. Some people call leaning too far to this side being a sellout. I disagree with that. I think that selling out is definitely a thing, but just playing music that you know people want to hear isn't really selling out. I generally consider this a crowd pleaser, and somebody on this end of the spectrum just plays music because they want people to have a good time, and I do too, but people on that end very much lean towards what are people gonna love, what are people gonna sing along with, what are people gonna, really run from the other room and go, oh my god, I love this song. That's awesome, and those DJs are really good DJs. Some people argue that they have no artistic integrity. I completely disagree with that. I think that that's a horrible thing to say to someone that is trying to provide a fun environment for other people and generally putting a lot of work in to do so. Some people on this side consider people on this side to be lazy or low effort. I don't see it that way. It's just a different method of putting a set together. I personally am almost entirely on this side. I play music that I like, but I like such a broad range of music that I can generally find music I like that the audience will also like, ideally. And we'll talk, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We'll talk more about that in a bit. In playing entirely for the crowd, every single decision you make about the set and the performance is for the benefit of the people in the audience. In playing for yourself, every single decision you make is audience be damned. I really like this song and I'm gonna play it. That can also be very dangerous. You can definitely get yourself into a situation where you really want to play some things that nobody wants to hear and have a great time, and you're the only one in the room having a great time, and it's not a great way to get rehired. So balancing that is very, very important. I would like to add that if you're the headliner, or you're on tour, or you're playing a festival, the rules are a bit different. People come to see what you have to give them in that setting, and it's kind of expected that they're just going to accept whatever you bring to them, especially for something like a tour. But even in the context of a tour, that can go wrong. If you look at Getter's Visceral, is there really a plane flying that low right now? But even in the context of a tour, that can still go wrong. If you look at Getter's Visceral tour, a bunch of people expected Getter to play the stuff that they'd known him for, the Trench and the old dubstep, but he named the tour after the Visceral album. Well, people didn't pay attention, and people went, and people booed him off stage for playing the music from the album that the tour was named after. Getter deserved better, and there was nothing that he could have done to be more clear about what he was planning to play at the show, but people didn't want it. People wanted dubstep, and they got mad because he didn't play what they wanted. He wasn't in the wrong here, but things can still go wrong, so it's still something you need to consider. To a certain extent, people paid money expecting a certain type of experience, and they've come out hoping that you're going to deliver that to them. But also, to a certain extent, part of the implied contract between a performer and an audience is that they're going to perform their performance. And if they wanted to hear just the music that they know, they could listen to it on Spotify. So there is an implication when you're doing something that you might introduce them to some new music, or you might not play every song that they wanted to hear, because that's not your job. Your job isn't to drip feed them their favorite playlist. Your job is to bring them a performance in line with the show. There is another plane. My number one tip on this topic, and if you take anything away from this video, I would hope that it's this, is to accept shows where there's an overlap between the music you love and the music people are going to want to hear. If you don't love the music that people want to hear at the shows, you're going to have to pick either playing music you don't like or playing music that only you like. If you're not sure if there's overlap on any given show, just ask whoever's booking you. Message them and say, hey, I'm really interested in opening for such and such a name that I've never heard of. Just wondering what kind of music you're expecting at this show. Or if you only play one style, say, hey, I'm really interested in opening for such and such a name. Just making sure that this style is okay for this show. If the promoter knows what they're booking you for and they give you the go-ahead, you're in the clear to play that. And obviously the audience doesn't know that the promoter's cleared you for that, but they can't get mad at you for playing the thing that you promised them you would play, if that makes sense. Personally, I really enjoy an extremely broad range of electronic music, so I can usually find some overlap between what I like to play and what the audience is going to want to hear. But I have definitely been offered shows that I turned down because I couldn't play what they needed me to play. And if I took the booking, I would have to pick between either A, playing music that I don't like and probably doing it poorly because I haven't practiced it and I don't know what I'm doing and my library for that type of music isn't very big or good, and B, playing music that I like and annoying everyone in the building, including the promoter, who probably won't book me again, and probably doing it poorly and annoying everyone in the room. Also, if you take a show that you're not right for, you're taking that opportunity away from somebody who is right for that. And maybe there's somebody in town who really, really would love to perform with their favorite artist who's on tour for the first time, and they come through and they don't get to play the show, but that's okay, and they go to the show anyways, and they turn up early because they're really excited for this show for their favorite artist, and you're playing something completely unrelated and kind of killing the vibe for everyone. That person is going to be really discouraged because they feel like they could have brought something to that experience that wasn't brought, and they're probably right. They could have done a better job than you. That show wasn't right for you. Don't take shows that you can't do justice to. It's a disservice to the other artists on the act, it's a disservice to the people that paid to come to the show, and it's a disservice to yourself. It doesn't look good. I don't want to make it sound like you always have to cater to the audience either. It is entirely acceptable. It is 100% acceptable. This is my insurance. It is 100% acceptable to play a 100% you set. Just play what you like. Make a journey out of it. Really put yourself into the hour. That's okay. And a lot of artists do that. And it's really, really good. I don't want to sound like you shouldn't do that. crafting an experience for people that they didn't know they wanted and taking them on a journey through different sounds and styles can be one of the most rewarding things a DJ can do. And watching people lock in and realize that this set is going somewhere that they want to go is an amazing feeling, and you should 100% strive for that. You can headline shows so that the rest of the acts on the bill and the audience cater themselves to your sound, and you're entirely free to play what you want. You can play open format shows where there are no expectations and you're not disservicing anyone by what you're playing. Both of these are great options. But if you knew that you could have an amazing time and the audience could have an amazing time, well, you would, wouldn't you? Most of the time, probably. Those are the times that I'm describing. This is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, which is why I'm being so careful with my words. I wholly believe that your art is your art, and however you believe it should be received, that's how you should deliver it. And it should represent, as best it can, whatever you want it to represent. And if that means playing an hour set and people aren't gonna enjoy some of it, that's fine, because it's your art. I am just providing tools for people to help meter their expectations, so that when you go into an environment where there is an expectation for the show, you at least know how to tailor your music to that show, or what's going to happen if you don't. Both are acceptable. I just believe that you should know beforehand. So, once you've accepted a gig where you know that you can play music that you will enjoy, and so will most of the people in the room because you can't please everyone, it's time to actually pick some songs and figure out exactly what you want to play out of all of that great music you've been listening to recently. It would be nearly impossible to do an actual tutorial on track selection just because it's so broad and it depends so much on your personal preferences and a billion other things which I'm not even gonna list. So what I'm going to instead try and do is give you some resources and some methods of thought to try and apply to your own situation that you can use to build your track selection. A reminder, before we go into these, all of these methods define this side of that spectrum, the playing to the audience side of the spectrum. Whatever you really enjoy listening to is this side of the spectrum. So all the hints I'm going to give you are over here, and then it's your job to find your place in that balance. Okay, so if you follow all of these to the letter, that's fine. Just know that you don't need to. You're allowed to lean this way as much as you want. I feel like the warnings are getting a little redundant, but insurance. One of the first things I consider when looking for tracks for a show is looking at the headliner. What do they play? What are they known for? If you aren't very familiar with them, go listen to a bunch of their music. Do they do a lot of analog instruments and guitars? Do they incorporate orchestral sounds into their work? Is it aggressive? Is it melodic? Is it complex and layered, or is it minimal? What do your friends like about that artist? What do other fans like about that artist? All of these are really good tools to figure out what people want to hear. Everyone going to that show likes at least some of those things because they went to go see that headliner. So if you start incorporating the same concepts and themes into what you play, people are more likely to like that as well. You do want to be a little bit careful here and just make sure not to step on the headliner's toes at all. Obviously, you never ever play the headliner's music, ever. If you can, if they're on a small label, I would avoid playing music from the label. If they're on a bigger one, it can be a little harder. I generally try and avoid some of it just because they're likely to play their label mates' music. If they routinely collab with anyone specific, I probably wouldn't play their music either because they're probably friends, and again, they're probably going to play some of their music. There's plenty of good music out there. You can find an entire hour's worth without having to play anything too similar to what the headliners. Another thing to consider is what kind of music is common at these events. I highly recommend and completely advocate for going to a bunch of these shows before you go. If it's a routine club night, go to the club as much as you can beforehand just to understand the atmosphere. It does a lot of things for you. You're gonna meet a lot of good people. You can try and meet the person booking you. It's very important to go to the club before you play it, if at all possible. But one of the things that it does for you, because we're getting kind of into how to play your first club show territory, which is a different video, but one of the things that it'll really do for you is give you an ear for what kind of music is being played at these events. That kind of thing probably won't sound out of place if you slip it in, you know? If there's a lot of a certain style, maybe you're in a specific area that really likes a certain artist because they used to live in that area, you can probably get away with playing some of that artist and people will enjoy it. Another one to consider is, what do people expect from you? If you have a brand, if you have a reputation for playing a certain type of music, people may come to the show seeing your name on it, expecting you to play that type of music. Leaning that way can be very good, but again, a major pitfall here is you have to look out for, what am I doing with my hands? You have to look out for the self-assuredness of thinking, oh, well, I'm a dubstep guy, so I'm just gonna play dubstep even though it's a techno show. Don't do that. Why don't do that? Why? Don't. Just, if you have a brand and if you have a reputation and people know you for something, you can try and lean that way, slip some of that in, but just make sure that what you're leaning towards still fits in with the rest of the show. Think about what city or part of the city you're in, or what part of the city a lot of people coming to the show are going to be from. I've never, ever in my entire career thought that it was a mistake to play a Drake song in a college town. That may not apply for everyone, but it's always applied for me. I don't always do it, and I only play it if I like it, but it's never gone poorly. It's always got a reaction. Thinking about your environment, not just in the venue, but in the surrounding area, is a really good idea. Think about what time of the night you're playing as well. I'm sure you have some amazing bangers for the Murata show that are gonna be incredible, and then you realize that you're playing a 45-minute opening slot and it's a 6-hour show. The audience has a long way to go. You do not want to be the one to fire all the cannons at 10 minutes past doors. There are exceptions to this, and this is a much more complicated subject than I have time to get into in this video. That will be another video. But think about the time of the night you're playing and try and help get a linear progression of energy from doors all the way up to the headliner. General rule of thumb, and again, there are exceptions and everything always changes, is that you want to end right before the headliner. As a unit of all of the support acts, you want to end at like an 8 out of 10 energy level, so that the headliner can come on, bang, 10, go, and it's still a big jump. There's a big surge of energy right when the headliner comes on. That's what you want. You also want to make sure, especially for longer shows, that people are not tired by the end of the night. If you go too hard for too long in the opening, people can definitely get tired and leave 2/3 of the way through the opener set because they need to go to sleep. That is super, super important, and I recommend coordinating with the other artists and the other openers to try and make a linear energy transition. Now, take some of these concepts and scroll through your library and see which tracks sort of ring a bell and think, oh, the headliner does play some psytrancey stuff sometimes. I could totally play these psytrancey songs that I almost never get to play. That is perfect for you. You get to play music that you like, you don't usually get to play it, so you're probably going to be really excited about it, and people going to the show at least don't despise that because the headliner does it, so you can do it too. There is a bee on my tripod. I'm not a fan. Once you have your huge stack of songs that perfectly fit the vibe that you need to go for the night, combine that with your huge stack of songs that you've just been loving for the past few weeks. That is your set, and somewhere in that big mess is your performance, and now it's your job to go through and find it. And like I said, I'm not going to talk about how to pick which songs to play when. I go over a tiny bit of this in my How I Prepare My Sets video. I think it's called How I Make My Sets. At like 4 minutes 43 or something, I talk about this process and starting to loop things in what order. I don't really go in depth in terms of choosing which songs to play when, but I talk about it a little bit. So if you want to know a little more about that, Go watch that video. It should be up there. It's in one of the. It's on the thing. That's what I would recommend for the next step. But go through this massive list of songs. Oh, by the way, you want to collect way too many songs. If at all possible, you want to have twice as many songs as you're likely to play when you start this process. And then you can sift out the really good ones and the ones that work and flow into each other. And if you end up not playing some, you can just not play those ones because the other ones are still good. If there was one that you really, really wanted to play that you didn't get to, find a way to work it into the set. You know, you can wedge it in there somewhere. But don't start with as many songs as you think you need to play and then try and build a set out of that, because inevitably it's not going to flow all the way. There's going to be some leftovers that didn't have anywhere to fit in, and you're going to have to try and cram them in somewhere. And then on the night, if you end up mixing faster than you thought you were going to, or you end up skipping a song or two because the vibe wasn't right, now you're in trouble. So get way too many songs is the point of what I'm saying. I really need to remake that How I Make My Sets video, by the way. It is old and does not look good, and I'll probably do it again and more in depth at some point, but I'm a busy guy. I don't know what to tell you. I don't want anyone to think that if they sit and focus on track selection, they can ignore all the other parts of making a good DJ set. The performance is multifaceted, and one of the keys to being a good DJ is to pick one or a few of these facets and put a lot of effort into them, become really good at them, and be passable at the rest, or as good as you can be, while focusing on the parts that you're really, really good at. You can be a jack of all trades DJ, but generally what I would recommend is putting a lot of effort into some things that you are fantastic at. But if this is your first time really sitting and thinking hard about track selection, I promise that you can improve your performance, at least from the perspective of the audience, by a significant amount with just a few hours of contemplating this. I actually just last night was talking to a newer DJ who said that for a long time he had it backwards and he was working on his mixing and his mixing and his mixing and getting it really clean, and just recently realized that the tracks he was playing weren't right for the show. And he started thinking more about what he wanted to play and what was going to make sense for that show. And he said that not only were people enjoying the show more, but he was enjoying playing more. He was getting more energy from the crowd and he was giving more energy back. It's a fantastic feeling to know that people are enjoying what you're doing while you're working hard at doing it. And track selection is a really big part of that. I consider track selection to be the most important part of DJing because it is the sole element that can ruin all of the others immediately. Let me know if you agree. Now go and make a set in Rekordbox designed to be direct support for one of your favorite artists. And while you're making this set, have a reason for every single song that you include. We'll see you next time.